Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Je suis extrêmement heureux de vous accueillir aujourd'hui pour cette nouvelle conférence virtuelle organisée par l'initiative IA Société, le projet Equality, en collaboration avec le Centre de recherche en droit, technologie et société et le Centre de recherche et d'enseignement sur les droits de la personne de l'Université d'Ottawa. I'm delighted to welcome you today for this new virtual event. And for those who don't know me, my name is Florian Martin Barreto, and I'm the director of the AN Society initiative. I am an associate professor and the University of Ottawa Research Chair in Technology and Society, as well as the director of the University's Center for Law, Technology and Society. Although we are hosting our virtual event, our event in a virtual fashion, I would like to start our event by an introductory affirmation. As I'm presently located on unsurrendered traditional Algonquin territory, and as one of its uninvited visitors, I benefit every day from my continued presence on this territory and from conversation with Indigenous identifying friends and students. And as such, I want to pay respect to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. I acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. Je rends également hommage à tous les peuples autochtones, qu'ils soient de la région ou d'ailleurs au Canada ou à travers le monde. Et je reconnais les gardiens des savoirs traditionnels, jeunes et âgés. Our aim at the AN Society initiative is to build a better understanding and framing of the ethical, legal, and social implication of AI by leveraging a transdisciplinary approach, notably to inform policymaking. And I do believe that in a context where technology, AI, and other digital tools are used as the new tools of colonialism and oppression, it's important to continue to make those affirmations and provide those acknowledgements, even in a virtual fashion. And for today's virtual event, I'm delighted to have you all with us to launch Tresdancing, a new short film on AI, surveillance, and educational technologies, co-produced by the AN Society Initiative, the Equality Project, and the Queen's Surveillance Studies Center, and created by Sava Singh, as she was then an Equality Scotiabank postdoctoral fellow. This is the fourth film in the Screening Surveillance series. And this movie has been made possible thanks to the support of the Social Science and Humanities Council of Canada and of the Scotiabank Fund for AN Society at the University of Ottawa. We will start the virtual screening in a few seconds, and it will then be followed by a conversation led by Dr. Valerie Steeves, AN Society and CLTS faculty member who is a full professor in the Faculty of Social Sciences at Ottawa and the principal investigator of the Equality Project. Professor Steeves will then be joined by creator Dr. Sava Singh, the director Hingman Leung, the co-producer Lesley Marshall, and the screenplay writer Tim Maughan, as well as actor Ann Tunkara, who plays the lead character, Frankie. We will invite you to ask you questions during the movie and after in the chat, and Professor Steve will share them with our guest. And without further ado, we will start the virtual screening of the movie. I will ask for your patience for like 5 seconds so we can launch the movie. Thank you.
So that's our new film, the fourth in these screening surveillance series, all of which wouldn't have come into being if it weren't for Sava Singh. So, but it's a team effort, and I'm really thrilled to have the whole team here actually to speak to you about the film. If the panelists want to turn on their cameras and their microphones, that would be great. So Anne, you'll recognize as Frankie, the star of the film. Tim and Sava co-created the film, co-created the story, and then Tim wrote the screenplay. Hingman is the director, and Lesley is the co-producer and runs the production company that helped us make the film. So welcome, everybody. It is fantastic to see you. I just want to go, woo! It is really exciting to launch this film. I'm really, really, really proud of the work you've done and really pleased that, that we can support it and that we can use it to talk to young people and adults about surveillance issues around education technology. So well done. Really glad to see you. So as you know, I co-lead the Equality Project with Jane Bailey, my dear friend and colleague. And right from the get-go, actually, we've dedicated the project as much as possible to promoting the views and experiences of young people. So for the lawyers in the crowd, all of the work we do is grounded in a child rights perspective. And we've thought, oh, look at all those applause. Thank you for the applauses in the chat. I just saw it. So we've taken a child rights perspective, and we have as a project thought really long and hard about the Convention on the Rights of the Child and what it means for young people to have the right to their own culture, the right to freedom of speech, the right to expression, the right to make decisions about them and their lives. So because of that, I'd like to start with you, Ann, if that's okay. We work with a lot of young advocates and young researchers and young artists. And it's really a pleasure to have had this opportunity to work with you. So I just wanted to ask first, how did you first hear about the project and what attracted you to the role?
Oh my gosh, thank you. And hi, guys. So the first time that I heard about the project was from my mom, and I believe it was, I think on Facebook, actually, I believe. And she was like, because I was so into acting, and I'd been doing a lot of like things, like acting things, background work, things like that. And so she told me, and she was like, "Anne, there's a project, and they're looking for people, and it's an audition. You have to audition." And I was like, cool, like I want to do it. And so I started like, learning more about it. And when I first got the script, I kind of like read about the script, and I was like, this is so cool. Like this is something that I really want. And yeah.
That is so exciting. Hingman or Lesley or Sava, what did you think when you first saw Frankie when she auditioned? Sava, do you want to take that?
I'm actually going to leave that to Hingman.
Okay, Hingman, what did you think?
When we met, and we were all blown away. And it really came through how much you enjoyed the script, but also you understand kind of the complexity around Frankie's character, and you really brought that through, and we were so impressed. So thank you for being part of this project, and I really enjoyed working with you, and I loved the ideas that you brought to it too. And by the end of the project, we worked together to figure out, how best to tell the story, and I really enjoyed that process.
Thank you.
And you're amazing.
It was really great. Like when we watched some of the audition tapes and everything, it was like Anne really like brought Frankie to life in a way that was just really just like we saw him just like, yes, this is Frankie. And it was just really great. And you were amazing. I'm so pleased that you did this project with us. You were just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is my first time talking to you as Anne too, and you are so different from Frankie. I guess that's why they call it acting. But yeah, just a phenomenal job. So you went through this process. You got this great role. How was filming different than what you expected it to be?
Oh, okay. So I knew it was like a small project. Like obviously I didn't think it was a whole like Hollywood thing. So I wasn't like expecting, well, I was expecting a lot, but I wasn't expecting like big, but it was really cool to see like cameras and microphones, because I didn't think it was going to be like that. I just thought maybe like 2 cameras, but like the microphones were really cool. It was my first time getting to work with like actual, like, I guess film microphones, and like the people, like, I don't know, it was different from what I expected. It was actually bigger than what I expected. Like I expected just something small, and but it was really fun.
I think it's really cool too that you know in the film you're talking about you're talking about cameras capturing your actions as a student, and when you're not in control, and yet as an actor you're participating in something in a completely different way. So I think it's a nice play on the technology as well. Yeah. Sava, I'm obviously a big fan. And I would like those of you who don't know to know that the 3 earlier films are actually award-winning films. They've won a number of awards as a really innovative way to disseminate new knowledge about surveillance technologies, but also to kind of support public debate. When you were co-creating the story with Tim, what were the main things you wanted to kind of bring out in this addition to screening surveillance?
It was an interesting challenge because I think we expanding the scope a little bit. We wanted to talk about like AI and algorithms, and we wanted to talk about surveillance, and we wanted to talk about ed tech. And that was partly in terms of, you know, responding to the stakeholders that were involved and the people who were like funding and supporting the project, which is like Florian from AI and Society at University of Ottawa, and then you and Jane and the Equality Project, and David Lyon and David Murakami Wood at the Surveillance Studies Center. And so I wanted to make sure that we kind of touched on all of the important and core research areas that all the stakeholders had. And also we were kind of dealing with a pandemic and dealing with like online proctoring, and education and ed tech became like this stage for thinking about how, when the world is under pressure, what that can result in. Like we all hoped that we would lean towards more equitable ways of dealing with education, more expansive ways with, you know, helping and supporting young people and educators and administrators. And we kept seeing how it was going the other way, where it was getting more kind of what's technology, what's invasive technology can we use, what proctoring can we use. And we saw a lot of stories about the pressures that young people had to deal with, like young people from school to university, the pressures that teachers were dealing with, having to kind of enact this upon their own students, even though they didn't really want to. So we wanted to kind of make sure that we highlighted all of these issues that we were dealing with in the now, but also what those could look like if we kept going that route. So I think, you know, when Tim and I were talking about it, we talk about this all the time. Like we don't get invited to parties because we're just like, so this is a great way, like we're talking about it. We're just like, okay, how do we, you know, use this kind of worry and concern that we have for the world and put it into a narrative and, you know, bring it alive for people to really think about like what all of this is doing to us and who we will become if we go down this path.
I really love how you offer, like, how you portrayed choice in the film. You know, because so often we're told you can choose, you have informed choice, and Ann, you did a great job as Frankie. You know, the first time it's kind of like, what? I can pass, sign me up. And then as it gets more and more burdensome, it's like, oh God, you know, like, oh, whatever, I'm stuck, I have to do this. So I thought that was a beautiful part of the film for sure. Do you think it ties into any carceral logics? Because we're talking about education, but it doesn't look like education. It looks a little bit more like jail.
It does. I think that's one of the things we wanted to highlight about some of the ways in which educational technologies introduced, or rather technologies introduced not just in education, but in other areas of our lives. And it's always presented as something that's going to make your life better, that's going to make your life more efficient, that's going to make you access certain things. And when you get down to it, you often find yourself that you feel like you're choosing to do this thing, but do you really have that choice, right? In Ann's case, well, Frankie's case, she was like, do I pass the class or do I accept this technology? And like you said, at the beginning, it feels like, of course I'm going to make this choice, right? I want to pass my class. And then as she keeps going, the choices are very manipulative in a way. And ultimately, she's turned into a cop at the end, right? Like, which is like, well, you're looking at illegal, you know, activity. There's a morality and like a carceral logic that's baked into a lot of these things, which we really need to be aware of, because before we know it, we're turning into snitches on our friends. but it's presented to us as a choice between like, you only get to do this or this. And the fact of the matter is that we're never given the choice to opt out. We're never given the choice that you don't have to do this. You're never given an alternative choice, which is like, you know, if what if Frankie had said, no, I don't want to do this technology thing? Did she have another way that she could get her grade to be better? Was that ever an option that was offered to her? And to kind of not, I don't want to put the blame on the teacher either, because the teacher, when you look at it, finds themselves in a situation where they don't feel like they have much choice, right? They're in an institution which says we have to make students succeed, and this is the way that they're going to succeed. And they're not given a lot of options either. So it's important to look at where these decisions are made, why they're being made, how they're being made, what they're turning us into. They're making us kind of like look at other people and report on other people and kind of have this judgment about our neighbors, about our friends, about our, you know, about stuff we're doing. So I think that's definitely what we wanted to bring out. Like it's not always obvious when you're using something, but you need to pay attention. What is this thing making you do? Who is this thing making you become? And I think that's very important.
Well, Tim, I thought in the script you did a phenomenal job with precisely that. Like some of my favorite parts of the film is when her little sister runs down the stairs and the facial recognition technology IDs her as the sister. And then when she's told, oh, you can count the calories of your chocolate bar, and it takes this long to burn them off running. How long would you and she puts the chocolate bar back. So I loved how you took these really complex concepts and embedded them in a storyline that I think really resonates with all of us. So from your perspective, when you were writing the storyline, you and Sava had this really strong vision. How did it affect the storyline as a whole? What other examples can you bring to the discussion where you really were trying to bring this really rich conversation about identity and surveillance into the film?
I think, like you were saying, like you and Sava were just saying, I think a lot of the central themes for me were about choice. Again, really sorry to go back to that. There's this kind of, it's like a theme in my work for a long time, and I enjoyed working on this project, so I got to like write about it specifically. But this kind of the use of Silicon Valley and large tech companies to use choice as a way of selling stuff, like literally as a way of selling stuff, because it appeals to consumers. Mm-hmm. The idea of buying agency, you know, through choice is kind of really strong. But it's also, you know, more importantly, I think it's a way of them abdicating responsibility. So, you know, like in this example, you know, Frankie chooses to use this technology. If it doesn't work out for her, well, then she made the wrong choice, right? So every stage of the process when she's making a choice, she doesn't really have one. If it doesn't work, though, it's still her choice if it goes wrong. And that's something I kind of wanted to emphasize a bit. And that's how we kind of came to the double ending thing I'd started writing the script already at that point, and we weren't sure how we wanted to end it. And we then came up with these two endings. And one which I thought was just too brutally dark, and the other one which was, the original ending was going to be the last ending here, where she goes off with her friends. So there's this kind of glimmer of hope to it. But then we were kind of like, actually, that kind of misses the point about this choice thing. It's showing that she does have a choice, and maybe, you know, both the choices have really negatively impacted her in personally or educationally. So we were kind of wanted to put in there, and I kind of like the idea that, you know, people might watch it, maybe if they're using it in an educational setting, if they're watching it with a class, and pause at that point where she's about to select whether to upload that footage at the end, and ask the class what they would do. Right? And I think that's a kind of like an interesting jump off point for discussions like this, because that's been the most, working on these projects with Sava over the last few years, it's been the most like rewarding thing, really, is just finding out that people are using them in class, and kids watching them, and teachers watching them with their students and stuff. It's been like really incredible. It's just made the whole project like really exciting to be involved with.
Yeah. Actually, Sava, I know you in particular have talked to kids all around the world. Do you want to just jump in with a few comments about how these films have been used to create certain kinds of conversations, kinds of things that kids are concerned about?
It's really been, I think the best part of this project has been able to, Zoom, Skype, whatever the verb is that we're using, into classrooms and engage with students on this. And just, they know about this. Like students are aware, young people are aware, people in schools and universities are aware of this stuff. It's not that they're not aware. And these films, when people have used them in their classrooms, have given that space for students to kind of talk about some of this, which is also something that's really, really great. And they've also brought up things and questions that I hadn't thought of. Like, it's really fun because they watch a film and be like, but what about this? But why did they do that? And it's really fun to kind of, and just interesting to you know, think through those things with them. They've been in classes on EdTech. They've been in classes in like user interface design, where, you know, one of the professors was like used one of the films as examining every interface that a human is interacting with and how that is designed to kind of elicit a particular, you know, a particular behavior. And I hadn't thought of it like that. So it's been really interesting to see how people have been using it in their classrooms, bringing up issues of surveillance. And people have been like very worried about it, because one of the things that the films do is like point to the now. Like everyone who's watched it has talked to me about how this feels like it's happened now. I feel like I read a story that's talked about this happening now. And that's really been like made people think about it too, right? And that's what we've been trying to do. And it's really been heartening that people have been watching this, and students have, and it's helped people think through this. I think, you know, students have gotten together and written things about it and thought about it and talked to their administrators and their like institutions about it. And that's just, it's really the project is doing what we had envisioned it to do. And I'm just really excited about that. And thank you for like to Hingman and Lesley and everybody. And I know I've seen like Ava's here and Zoe's here. There are a couple of people who are in the film who are in the audience.
Oh,
and it's just,
hi, I didn't know that.
and it's just so like wonderful that we were able to come together and create this film and, you know, bring it to light. And I'm excited for people to use it.
Well, Hingman, we were particularly excited when you signed up to the project, because as a project, again, like we're trying to create this space where young people can express themselves and their own concerns about the technology. But we're always looking for novel ways of disseminating that knowledge. So you and I were having a conversation yesterday by email where you said, yeah, you know, I'm a documentarian and I've thought about that from a documentarian perspective, but it's really cool to see what you can do with a narrative film. And I'd love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, this is a question that has been really top of mind for me, because I started, you know, my work has been rooted in documentary filmmaking, and that comes from my interest in kind of sharing ideas and knowledge with people who might not even know about this knowledge that's out there. It's a really good way to inform policy. So I've been working in policy for a very long time, first on climate change and then on health. And it's the more typical way of sharing knowledge is documentary filmmaking, because here you have these experts and they're telling you about something, and this is it replicates kind of a classroom experience. But having been involved in this project, it just opened up a whole new door for me to think about how to share information and how to share ways of getting people to think differently. And this, I think, comes from the power of story and the power of storytelling, in inviting people, no matter what age you are, no matter what background you are, into a world where you might not even have imagined, and think and put yourself in the shoes of whoever is going through, you know, the story. And I think in that way, I now think that documentary filmmaking is a bit limiting in that sense. That, you know, it's with documentary filmmaking, you're being told something, whereas in a narrative film like this one, you're invited into a world where you get to make your own decision, where you get to form your own opinion about what's going on. So I think it's really valuable, and it's something that I would love to keep doing.
It's funny because when you said in the documentary, you know, you put the experts on the screen and they provide your expertise and kind of talk from above to below kind of thing. And one of the things we found in all the work we've done with young artists, young researchers, is young people are the experts in their own lives. So I agree with you. Storytelling is an incredible way to engage with them so they can kind of give voice to a lot of their experiences. So yeah, it's been really fun to see. Lesley, you know, because you've worked with the project, that as a project, we've really been committed to looking at the issues through an intersectional lens. So we wanted to talk to a wide variety of kids who sit at a diverse number of intersections to really get a sense of that rich lived experience. And I know that as a producer and someone who runs your own production company, that you have a particular approach to this. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your production company, and then perhaps a little bit about how you think that this commitment to intersectionality really shaped the whole process of making this film.
Oh, thank you. So my company is called Maven. It's basically me and a lot of awesome collaborators. But basically, you know, Sava brought this project to me through a connection that we had through the tech folks. And I mean, bringing a project that was centering the voices of women of color. And I was like, well, we got to find that crew. We got to find that team. And in my experience and in my industry, it's very exclusive. And it has been a really hard journey in terms of like finding and maintaining representation behind the camera in terms of technical roles and also like producing and creative roles. I think there's been a lot of focus on making sure that there's representation in front of the camera, but behind the camera is what I focus on in my company because that's what I can do. But yeah, the story and the project as a whole is Sava, and I mean, that's how I think of it because that's how it came to me. And so yeah, we made big lists of like who could we bring in, but then honestly, I have found just in my years of focusing and really being dedicated to inclusion and wanting to live that because of my experiences of like wanting to have more women behind a camera. And I was like, how can we bring more people? I have actually attracted more and kept and trained and mentored people so that our list is that we have a diverse list of people that we maintain that is always people who are looking for more experience and who are really talented. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that like it wasn't a huge challenge because that's already the crew and team that we work with. It was more just, you know, bringing people to the plate, as they say, at that time, because scheduling is such a thing in film, and I mean in all workplaces. But this was a tight timeline. So
Yeah.
and pandemic, working in the pandemic was like it's still happening, like, and it was full swing in the summer with the vaccinations coming out and stuff. So we had a lot of challenges, but we're able to realize that vision of keeping like a really great cast and crew, and also the music. Like Sava picked out a lot of the music, and Hingman picked out the music too, and really focusing on wanting to have like again women of color at the center, and highlighting local artists and local voices, and putting our money where our mouths are, which is what's kind of important in this business too. It's like we have to invest in our behind the camera crew. But I also just wanted to say really quickly to note on Hingman's point, just like this narrative. Way of telling the story and like presenting this as in knowledge transfer. It's like it's the idea of these possible futures and like sharing what futures are actually happening now and showing those like emotional intimacies, which you can do in a creative lens. It brings you in, whereas a documentary you can get in there, but it's totally different. And you're right, Hingman, and I wanted to compliment your comment there.
I just want to add
I
sorry, I wanted to add to what Lesley was saying in terms of like, you know, when I got in touch with her to take on this project, I was at first impressed that she did, because I was like, here's the project. We have a really short timeline. She's like, we can do this. And the people she brought in on the crew, after this experience, this is how I want all of my future work experiences to be like. Everyone that came on was so like focused on what we were doing, compassionate with each other, listening to each other, like really tuned in and caring about everybody. Like we had challenges, we had conflicts, we had stuff, but we stayed with it. We worked with each other, we supported each other. And it was just like an incredible pleasure to work with the folks that I worked with on this. And Lesley brought all of that together and made it happen. And, Hingman brought it to life and like embodied Frankie and made it together. I'm just like, I guess I'm gushing because the film is out now and it's a big deal. And I know that we put a lot into it. And it was just such a pleasure to work with this group of people because everyone brought just being wonderful. Sorry, I'll stop there.
I don't think we could have made it otherwise, especially because of the pandemic, because it created so many different pressure points. And this film would not have been finished if it weren't for the professionalism of all of you. So we're very grateful for the skill and talent and commitment that you brought to the project for sure. It's funny, Sava, I was just about to say what you said. So you just preempted me a little bit because Lesley has been a rock on which this film has been produced. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Tons of work from everyone. Hingman, I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier. And you said that it was really a pleasure to work with Ann and hear her ideas for how the film could proceed. And I imagine from all of the actors, particularly the young actors. And I was just wondering, how did that shape the final product?
Yeah, that's something that I really enjoyed the process of working on this film because I got to work with young folks who are all super invested in the story. And the way that we worked together on it was we met a number of times, virtually or in person, and we created this world together. As a director, I have the pleasure and honor of facilitating that relationship and facilitating this conversation and inviting all of the actors to share their take. What is it about this character that really speaks to you? Who do you think this person is? How do you think this person would react? And how does this group solve problems if they have problems? And those are the really important foundational conversations that we had to build the story and to inform how these characters would react to each other when these situations are happening. And so I think it was that part of it is very important to the storytelling and to what you see on screen. So even though you don't see it on screen, it's those relationships that are the foundation of how the characters react to each other and how the characters react to their environment. And it was such a lovely process to have been able to do that and to build the story together.
One of the things that I noticed really strongly in this film is that often when you watch a film about surveillance, it's often very dark. Like Tim said, there's the dark ending and the not so dark ending kind of thing. I thought there was a really beautiful balance between the constraining aspect of this technology, but Frankie's life in the community. And so much of that came through in the dancing. The dancing was just a brilliant idea because it really juxtaposes that beautifully. And all of the dancers were amazing. And I loved how you as a director took those and Lesley as editor as well, took those images and sort of started in a representation of the real world and then put them into an online space in a way that was expressive. So yeah, really, really, really well done.
That was genius, Lesley. It was so good.
There certainly so many surveillance messages embedded in this film. I'm sure it's going to be something that we're going to be using for years when we go into classrooms or public libraries or with some of our community partners like the YWCA. We're always looking for ways to engage young people in conversations about issues that matter to them. So I know that this film is going to have a long life, as do the other three in the surveillance studies series. So I just wanted to open it up now to the audience. Anybody have any questions, comments? if you can use the chat box and let us know what you're thinking. There's certainly a lot of wonderful comments in the chat box already. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
While they're thinking of things, I just want to give a shout out to a couple of people. Like Clark is here, Clark Mackey, who was my mentor and guide for the first 3 in Queens, and he really supported and helped kind of figure this out. So I want to just like acknowledge him, because I would not have made this film without having had his guidance for the first 3.
That's lovely. And some of the other actors are in the audience as well, I understand. If you guys want to just even turn your mic on, and I'd love to know if there's one thing making the film taught you about surveillance or equity or equality in network spaces. That would be wonderful to hear. I have a question about gamification, actually, so I'm going to preempt, give you guys a little bit more time. Sava, you know, when we were doing research during the pandemic, that gamification certainly came up a lot in education, and maybe Anne, I'll start with you. Did those glasses feel really different than a lot of the stuff you're already doing in class, or did they sort of feel like they were part and parcel of things that you see in school now?
Honestly, I could like envision it being something that would happen in school. Like it felt like real, you know, like it didn't feel like it felt like something that would actually happen. Like the glasses, the technology, how it's advancing now, you know, it kind of felt yeah.
I wondered if because that's a feeling you bring to it. Though my favorite part is your teenage angst when you shrug your shoulders. But yeah, it felt, you know, often when we did the 3 earlier films, the idea was to go kind of now but put it into the future, whereas, as Sava said, the future kind of caught up with us, that's for sure. Tim, were you purposely trying to kind of unpack gamification in the script?
You're muted, Tim.
Sorry.
It's not a Zoom meeting if somebody isn't muted at one point and you have to tell them. It's usually me.
I've been, yeah, I mean, it was like it's been a main focus of my work for like 10 years now, gamification, I think. I started writing fiction about, you know, the future gig economy stuff in sort of like 10 years ago. And it's something that is always there, and I've just seen it creep up. When I first started getting like working in doing this kind of work, you know, you had Jane McGonigal and all these terrible people running around saying, you know, it was the future of healthcare was getting your kids to pretend they're superheroes to look after you. And it's just awful. Just like, oh my God, we've got to con people into behaving, you know, like politely to people. It just seemed awful then. But then to see what Silicon Valley kind of jump on it and make it this kind of, you know, dopamine hit kind of approach to compliance with the technology is just really disturbing. And it's not like the experience like what Anne just said. I think it's probably very scarily close to what's in schools now. It's definitely very similar to what's in Amazon warehouses right now, right? You know, it's very similar to the interfaces like a lot of people deal with in retail, fast food and stuff, where it's very gamified. You have like, you know, objectives to hit and stuff like this. And it's been in labor for a while. I mean, like I don't want to go on a whole thing about this, but I did a trip to China a few years ago, and I went on a container ship and I looked at container ports and stuff. They have badges on the sides of cranes in China for how many containers you can get off a ship in one shift and stuff like that. So this is kind of like, it's a form of gamification, you know, and the whole interface that guides, you know, kind of supply chain workers in those formats is very gamified in some ways. So it's something that's certainly been around for a while, and something is very prevalent in labor spaces. So I'm not at all surprised to see it coming more directly into education, and if it's not been there for a while already.
It has been in education for a while, right? Like one of the things in early ed tech hype we've been dealing with is like gamification was a term that came out of that. And it always rubbed me the wrong way. I've never reacted well to that term because it's an attempt to bring, like, it's, you know, it's in a simplistic way, it's an attempt to be like, oh, young people love playing games. How can we make education fun for them? Let's just put a layer of games on top of it. And that's really such an unfortunate approach to this, right? There is a lot of learning in games. I think that games are a place where, and have been a place where a lot of learning takes place in terms of like social interaction, in terms of like understanding how things work, in terms of like problem solving. All of this does exist in games. There is learning happening in games, but education is different from that, right? And trying to force like history into like something like that, or math into something like that, or like doing it that way feels lazy to some degree. And I think there are ways in which to make it really interesting and make it really engaging and have young people and students really engage with content that's presented in a particular way, but to kind of flatten it to this very behaviorist kind of approach to like, you do this thing, you get this thing, and you get points, and you get, you know, it's just, it feels like antithetical to what education should be. And that's always worrisome, but we see that increasing a lot more. And then adding a layer of like this invasive proctoring stuff and this like kind of watching everything you're doing and judging all that you're doing and forcing you to do certain things. It's just like, I feel like we're eroding the joy in education even more. Like it's already hard for the young people. It's already so hard for students. And we're adding so much more stress to them now. And it becomes just really, you know, it's really disheartening to watch things go that way. And so pointing out that this stuff, like people think that, well, if we make them do, you know, math problems, depending on what they're doing in the world, that'll be a cool way to make them learn. I'm like, not really. Like poor Frankie is like, oh God, I have to do these errands. Oh God, I have to answer this question about bus timings when I'm trying to figure out what bus to catch. Like that's awful. Why do that to people? So I think we all, you know, we do want to kind of poke at this notion of gamification a little bit, because I feel like it's not taking things in a good direction, and you're adding like surveillance and algorithmic like judgment within this stuff, and it's just like it feels like it's getting worse and worse.
A lot of the work we've done actually on ed tech looks at how the technology is a surveillance technology. It's not just a game, and how that restructures the relationships in the classroom. So you have this private space where you've got freedom to make mistakes. Suddenly it's no longer private, it's being mined for all sorts of purposes, and it shifts the relationships. And I thought another thing that was beautifully acted, directed, and produced and written into the film was the teacher. The teacher was just like, the relationship between the student and the teacher was just so fractured, and the teacher did such a good job of embodying that exhaustion. So certainly that impact on privacy and the way that surveillance reshapes these relationships really, I thought, was an important part of the film. Jane has indicated in the chat box that, you know, when she watched the film, she thought about the issue of embedded racism, in how racism is embedded in these technologies and plays out in the real world. And she put a link to a story about a Concordia student where we have strong evidence of that. So, I mean, this is well beyond theoretical. There's been lots of empirical research done that tracks how these kinds of discriminatory biases play out through these technologies. So Jane's question is, in light of these sorts of issues, are there particular messages you think it would be important for policymakers and educators to think about? I'm going to throw that to you, Hingman, first, because you said as a documentarian, you've often worked on different policy issues where you've thought about you know, climate change and how to create that conversation with policymakers. So given the ways that racism is embedded in these technologies and how those algorithms play out in an unfair way, how could we use a film like this to really engage in that policy debate?
Thanks for that question, and I have so much to say about this because I do work in anti-racism currently in health research. So a lot of conversations come up around, you know, how do we bring this these conversations to policymakers? And in terms of this film, I think what's really valuable is putting the policymakers in the shoes of the users of this technology. and going through the everyday life, for example, of someone who is living this with lived experience. Because oftentimes what we find now is that people who are in positions of power, who are making policies, don't necessarily have the lived experience, don't necessarily have an understanding of how their decisions impact everyday life. And so the power of this film is to have a way of inviting those views and inviting those voices into the conversation without the need to. Well, I mean, I still think it's important to have focus groups and bring people together and town halls, etc., to understand broadly what the issues are. But this is a good way to illustrate to policymakers from the start that there are real world consequences and these are real people.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed in the attendee list there are a number of students from my department in criminology, and we're actually going to have a grad seminar on dissemination, looking at documentaries and film and other formats and how to make that conversation meaningful with policymakers. So they like numbers for sure. They like quant, 14% of students, that kind of thing. But what I have found over the years is it's exactly what you said. It's narrative. It's narrative that puts people into their social role as a real person, not just as an expert policymaker distanced from it. Yeah, so the film is definitely valuable from that.
I wanted to add to that real quick and say, like, I think another thing that would help in terms of conversations with policymakers, and this is something that Tim and I, having collaborated often on this, talk about, is like what we're trying to present with some of these narratives is not, we don't want people to take this and be like, well, how do we solve for this? So it's not that, there've been a lot of conversations about how, especially with the proctoring software, that it doesn't see certain tints of skin, right? There've been students with darker colored skin that had to do various things and like themselves in certain ways to be visible to this extremely invasive surveillance technology. And the answer isn't always how do we make the technology see those people better. The answer sometimes is let's not do this at all. We don't need facial recognition in the world. There's not a single context in which facial recognition is required for anything that we want to do. We don't need this. So sometimes sometimes I want people to understand that I'd like policymakers to understand that we don't necessarily need to make an invasive surveillance technology better at being invasive and surveillance-y. We can just do away with it and find other ways to make sure that people get what they need, because that's what's important. And I think that's another thing, we always worry with the kind of work that we do, that people be like, well, if this thing is not working, how do we make it work? And it's like, no, we don't need it at all. And I'd like for people in policy conversations to allow for that, allow for that conversation, being like, what are we trying to solve here and who is benefiting from it? And we have to focus back on the people that need to benefit, not the people who are making money, not the companies who are trying, you know what I mean? Not, all of those things need to come back to who are we actually trying to help and who's being left out of the conversation.
I think if I can just add to that, I think I get asked about this a lot, and my work is, are you anti-technology? I'm not anti-technology at all. I'm very pro-technology. I am very into technology. I'm very into gaming and computer games and VR and all sorts of stuff that people might be surprised I'm into. My problem with this tech isn't that it exists; it's how it's run and who owns it and where it is. Right? I don't have a problem. First thing I do when I get a phone is I turn off, voice activated agents like Siri and stuff like that instantly. It's not because I don't think they're cool technologies. I think they're incredibly cool technologies and incredibly helpful technologies for people, especially you have mobility and other issues. Like, they're incredibly important technologies. They don't need to be run in the cloud. These technologies now, our phones are powerful enough now that they don't need to run these technologies in the cloud. They can be run locally. And the whole reason for running stuff in the cloud is purely surveillance. That's the only reason for doing it. Right? It's so that data, that everything you say to your phone in that example goes to Apple or Facebook or Google, whoever's agent you're using at that time, rather than it just staying on your phone. And I think that's, for me, that's something that, it's always worth bringing up in discussions about this stuff. It's not that the technology is bad. It's like, who owns it and what are they really using it for? And why is the infrastructure being built the way it has instead of a different way?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, because who controls the infrastructure has a huge impact. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but one of the comments from Negus is that the reveal to me is that the big tech corporations and education are so intertwined, and that relationship can be really scary, right? Is that something that you think is readily apparent to young people in Canadian schools today, or is that still something we need to unpack a bit?
I think sorry. Okay. Wait. Sorry, my computer is really weird right now.
And it isn't a Zoom meeting if somebody doesn't like lose the connection. So that's in keeping with our whole experience too.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Could you repeat it?
I was just wondering, so the conversation has been looking at how big tech companies and education are so intertwined, and that somebody's making money off of a lot of this stuff that you use every day in school. And often when we sit down with to do qualitative research with people your age, people will say, hey, why does Google get to have all of my docs? What's happening to it? They shouldn't be making money off of that. Just wondering if you felt that was an issue that was really obvious to the people that you go to school with, or if it's something that's still kind of hidden.
We actually had a discussion like this in my class the other day, and we were talking about would it be like beneficial to go online or like stay in school. And I think it is like a big thing because like big tech companies are making a lot of money off of our schooling and off of us, because like not only are we buying the computers and stuff like that to do schooling, we're also going on Google Docs every day, Google Slides, Google, like everything, we're doing that every single day. So I think it's like something that more people should talk about, because like it is kind of like an issue. And like thinking about it, I'm trying to think, like they make a lot of money off of what we do, so it's more now than how they did before, because the tech companies are growing now. So it's like, yeah.
Seem like they've got their fingers in a lot of pots, that's for sure. Well, thanks for that. Sava, this is, as we said earlier, the fourth in a series of films. I wondered if you could talk about how it fits into the screening surveillance collection as a whole.
I think with each of the films, we try to focus on one particular aspect of surveillance, and I like Frames talked about smart city surveillance and how that affects people. Black Sites talked about like if healthcare services and your social media kind of come together, what could happen. A Model Employee talks about surveillance in the workplace and if that spills into your real life. And it was really exciting to do one that was specifically about education technology and the surveillance capabilities of that. That has been something that's been at the core of a lot of, my work that I've been doing. So it really fits into like, we've tried to like take aspects of people's lives that we take for granted, that we have so much of our lives are mediated by these technologies, like so much of the stuff that we access, and we access each other through this right now, right? We're being surveilled by Microsoft in many ways right now, everything we're doing right now. Like, the film is up on YouTube, and, everyone who interacts with it there, you're tracked and stuff like that. So it's trying to piece together a larger picture of like how in everyday life, in small ways, we are all being looked at and being judged and being analyzed, and decisions are being made about us and that we have no control over. So bringing ed tech and surveillance into this really fits into like the whole series. And I don't know if I hope it continues to be a series, obviously, because I think it's important to it's important to highlight different aspects of life and how they can affect us. And this really fits into that. Like young people, especially interacting with technology, not having a choice to do that is honestly, the pandemic really brought that to light in a really profound way. And I hope that this adds to the conversations we've already started happening. It's been very heartening to see a lot of communities take this on and talk about it and push back against some of this. There have been, we're all doom and gloom, and that we should continue to be doom and gloom. But I want to highlight that there are stories of resistance, and there are elements and organizations that have come together to push back against some of this. And we need to highlight that a lot more, because that gives other people fuel to do that as well. I know that there have been students in universities who've said no to proctoring and no to some of these companies and have been successful. We need to support student unions. We need to support adjunct unions. If there aren't any, we need to support them being created. We need to use our collective organization to push back against some of these very oppressive and surveillance technologies. And I think the films are a way to kind of point out, being like, oh, you thought going to school was free from this? No, it isn't. Or you thought walking in a city, you weren't being, no, you're being looked at. Or you thought looking at Instagram is okay? No, they're looking at you there too. Or you think working and for your uncle is okay? No, you're being watched there too. So we kind of want to highlight that every aspect of your life is touched by this. And we need to kind of keep an eye on that. I think there's a question.
Yeah, there is. There's a hand up, but I
think it's Masha.
Thanks. I can't see whose hand is up, which is not very helpful on my screen. So Masha, please. Can you see who it is? Because I've got plus 41 and I can't get to it. It's not letting me screen down.
It says, Masha, can you hear us? Maybe she's chatting. I know Masha.
It is Masha.
Hi.
Oh,
there you go.
Masha, can you put your question in the chat box? Jane mentioned actually in response to Sava that that this pressure is leading to certain institutions dropping proctoring software, for example. So though I think it is fair to say, like Negus had said earlier, this is an unstoppable train to a certain extent. So we really do have to think really carefully about how to say no.
Very much so.
Well, Masha's doing that. I was just going to say that one of the things that I've found when we talk about privacy as a corrective is that we look at using data protection legislation to sort of say, well, we need control over our data and people have to ask for our permission and all these types of things. I always like to remind people that in the 1970s, when Alan Weston was coming up with the data protection, it was the last step in a whole series of questions. And the first 5 of them are, do we really need the surveillance, or is it going to do something bad to us? And then if it's like, well, we really need it, it's got some downsides, the question then was, well, we'll use data protection to protect us. And I found it fascinating over the last 50, 60 years that we've just skipped that whole process. So Tim, you were saying that tech is fun, tech can be creative, tech can be really useful. And so much depends on who's in control of that technology. I mean, I can't even, with my Apple, I've had a series of unfortunate events with my laptops where water was spilled on them twice. And the first time I could just say, I don't want the cloud. The second time I had to say I didn't want the cloud every single time I turned on my computer. And with this laptop, I have no choice. So those infrastructural questions are incredibly important. So Masha is wondering if we were considering sending this film to tech companies, if it's just an instructional film for teaching, or are we thinking of using this film to advocate with the tech companies themselves?
I would love to. I know a fair number of people who work in various tech companies, and I hope they take it. I haven't targeted tech companies directly, partly because I want other people to be more engaged. I feel like, it's very frustrating when you have a slew of people who are higher up in tech companies and tech bros that are they tend to go through the cycle of be a tech guy and then make a lot of money and then come out here saying oh no, did we do something evil? And I really hate the whole mea culpa arc of the tech bro life. Because I'm even if you realize you're doing something wrong, then just take your money, be quiet, and go away. That would be best for everybody. So in some ways, I don't want to directly engage with tech companies because I want all of us to understand what tech companies stand for. I know a lot of good people work for tech companies. I have friends who do. That sounds weird, but they do. And I hope that some of them might take this there. I am happy to talk to tech companies, I suppose, under certain conditions. I don't want to be the person who's like paid $1 million to have a conversation with a bunch of tech people, because that's not my target audience. My target audience is us, regular folks who need to push back against tech companies. I don't want to give tech companies ideas or be a checkbox saying like, well, we had one woman of color come and talk to us about the problems of surveillance and race, and we're done now. I don't want to be that person. I really want to work with community organizations and say like, how do we make sure that we are protected from some of this stuff?
And it's often as an educator, as a policymaker, as an advocate who's been active in this space for, you're getting lots of thumbs up, who's been active in this space for a long time, you're balancing an incredibly powerful, well-funded machine with community interactions. So film is definitely, I think, an incredibly creative way to do that. We've come to the end of our time, so I'd like to thank all of our panelists for the incredible creativity and work that that they put into the film itself. And thank you for taking time with us to share your thoughts today. It's just been a pleasure to have this conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing what all of you do next. So thank you as well to the Center for Law, Technology, and Society for hosting this event, to our funders, and to the Surveillance Studies Center, who started the screening surveillance initiative and continues to support this collaborative film as well. So thanks to everybody. It's been a wonderful conversation. Hope to see you in the real world soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You can watch it online on YouTube for free forever.
Thank you. Great job.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Love you so much. Thank you.